Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am so happy to be here and to be sharing this information with you. And a special shout out to members of my group, Surviving Post-Separation Abuse and Parenting in Context of Coercive Control. I just got back into my old Facebook yesterday, so it was really nice to interact with everyone. So, special hello to you guys. Like my glasses? Just got them, Warby Parker. So a little bit about what's going on in my case. I spoke with an attorney who gave me some good advice, and the good advice was that I will be better off as a self-represented litigant than I will be having any other attorney come in at this point and try to help me with what their perspectives are or their abilities are. So, in addition to that, exposing corruption is of utmost importance, and investigative journalism like Mike Volpe and Megan Fox and others that I'm finding out more ways to be able to get the message out. So as a whole, our community can know what's happening within the walls of the agencies that they delegate the responsibility of the most important things in our lives to. So we obviously need transparency and oversight, and that's not something that we have right now. So investigative journalism is where it's at. I have court tomorrow, and I'm most likely I'm going to continue it. There's numerous reasons why. First reason being I'm not prepared for my plan. I'm really kind of excited to do this. But my reason for continuing mainly is finding out that law enforcement, Winston-Salem Police Department, and DSS in Forsyth County and others failed to actually investigate any abuse of my child whatsoever. Forsyth County does not take violence against women and children seriously, and the official numbers reflect that in a very scary way. And as a whole, I've seen every aspect of their system other than their criminal justice system. But from what I can see, from what I can gather of my ex's criminal record, he's gotten probation 7 times, and they've dismissed every charge where he has a victim. I can just tell you now, victims do not have representation in Forsyth County, North Carolina. And I can almost guarantee you this is something that's internationally happening. And I can tell you from my group and all these other women that I interact with, it's a constant. Law enforcement as a whole does not take domestic violence acts between people that have a special relationship, that the police owe them a duty of care because of that relationship. They're not getting the actual protections that they deserve. And there's some documents that I found from 1998 that, if implemented, would, create such a change for the future generations of the world, the United States, North Carolina, that, we could possibly stop the generational cycle of sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, domestic violence. Because in the past, these generations have been prevented in one way or another from speaking out, speaking their truth. There's been no accountability for pedophiles, no accountability for domestic abusers, for all of these crimes. And now we're seeing an uptick of all of these murders of these beautiful children and women, and there's no accountability. So I have a proposal somewhat, and I did go to a town hall meeting for an incumbent U.S. senator. He's a North Carolina senator. His name is Jackson, and he is a family man, and his press secretary has been corresponding with me and others to get together to offer some solutions. And I think that this would be an awesome solution, because he said, Senator Jackson said that the legislature is still in session right now. And I think that means a lot. His wife also told me I was brave, which that was pretty awesome, because I spoke up. This is something that means everything to me and for, millions of women everywhere. this has become a crisis. So we got to shed some light on it in numerous ways to get the response that we deserve and the respect that should be a given. But at some point as a society, we decided that it's okay to abuse women and children, and that should be acceptable. You can start with North Carolina's, North Carolina, which is actually something that the court held in 1874. If no permanent injury has been inflicted, nor malice, cruelty, nor dangerous violence shown by the husband, it is better to draw the curtain, shut out the public gaze, and leave the parties to forgive and forget. And that's state of North Carolina v. Oliver. We also have, late into the 19th century, when a North Carolina court held that a man could physically punish his wife without fear of legal reprisal as long as the stick was no thicker than his thumb. Domestic violence wasn't even considered a crime till the 70s. And this is something that law enforcement believes should be kept as a private matter behind closed doors. And this is no one's business. So as we've come a long way in domestic violence laws and the Violence Against Women Act, things like that, there have been, cries from not just the victims, but, lobbyists, advocates, and people that don't want to be sued, because when there's a domestic violence situation and law enforcement is asked to respond in a certain way, they're owing that person, that woman, that child a duty of care with that special relationship that exists. And this is for North Carolina. And if they are negligent in those duties, they are open to be sued. And so obviously this is something that should be taken seriously, and you would think that it's taken seriously. It's not taken seriously at all. There's a couple of things that I just wanted to go over as far as what I have experienced within the Forsyth County response to domestic violence, and others as well. There's no action taken whatsoever as far as the investigation. There's no arrest for actual abuses. And there's certain things that, although they're domestic violence protective order violations, they're crimes, and they're not being enforced as crimes or charged. The court and law enforcement, DSS, are allowing false charges, arrests, reports, allegations against domestic violence survivors without any accountability or any stopping these men from doing this. It's a rare case when the court has stopped a litigant from filing. So it's just nonstop. There's no, kind of legal assistance really to survivors of domestic violence, even though legal aid is supposed to represent you. In my case, there's a conflict, right? So none of these procedures and laws, protocol is being followed. There's no oversight. We've got this influx of murders and suicides, and the family courts choosing to ignore reality. These attorneys and judges and others are intentionally prolonging the suffering, for pay. We've got these children in custody of abusers during investigations on purpose, and no one's taken a stand. Violence against women and children are allowed. It's not that bad unless it's permanent damage, okay? In my case, I've been made to pay child support and threaten me with contempt constantly, even though I've been paying the whole time. And even when I had custody, they made me pay. Judge Miller made me pay. There's fraud in that file too. Things that are missing out of my court file are as thick as the court file is now. Things that are supposed to be there are hidden and gone. It's just kind of like a joke. And it's like some kind of sleuth game. I feel like Nancy Drew in there. It's just crazy. So all of these things are happening. And at the same time, family court and child support enforcement court are two different venues. So we got domestic violence survivors paying their abuser to abuse them. They get protective orders, get custody. In my case, still paying child support, still threatening me. Well, you better go hire another attorney to get you out of that one. I've been threatened with contempt, but there's no offer for a public defender there. But In my ex's case, he gets public defenders for contempt. I've just never been given that luxury. Court orders are not properly accounting for prior hearings. It's just a paragraph based on hours and hours and hours of testimony with all of the evidence removed. So the next judge can say, I don't see that here. We can't. That's not in this file. We can't even talk about that. Sorry. Let's talk about all these other false charges. And what year was that? That's not current. We're not going to talk about that either. Okay. Really treating survivors of domestic violence hostile, belittling, degrading, minimizing abuse, and blaming the victims. Just ignoring them, labeling her mentally ill, despite the fact that she has PTSD from abuse and continued abuse through the family court system by abusers. I'm not the only one. There's numerous women who are being prosecuted, criminally prosecuted for protecting their children, and the perpetrators of abuse aren't even getting arrested or charged at all. The investigation is blamed and put on the shoulders of other agencies who aren't investigating. And the numbers show that crimes against families have went down and declined dramatically in the state of North Carolina. We just don't hold perpetrators accountable here. It's her fault she was with him, and it's her fault she left him, right? Dismissing DV violations. They're not that serious, right? Just misogyny based on race, based on your past, and those things have been issues with me as well. Definitely. Some racism, some prejudice there. There's all these forensic interviews and child medical exams that are supposed to be not happening. The abusive person has custody of the child and makes sure that there are no real disclosures, and the system seems to be widespread on this. This is something I want to touch on. Children, when they're being abused by someone, a parent, they don't say, I hate them, I never want to see them again. They don't draw broken hearts and call their parent fat. They don't start randomly saying, Mommy hit me. They don't just outright dislike their parent. Abused children still love that parent equally, and they think it's okay. So when the court and all these people are hearing these children under care of an abuser come in and say, I'm scared of my mommy. She hit me for no reason. She's fat. I never want to see her again. Now, to a trained mental health professional, immediately we'd know. False allegation. Obviously, those aren't a child's words. That's not how a child reacts to abuse of a parent, primary caregiver, a mother, right? They're going to let that slide, though. And continue the false allegations because they're a money-making machine. So there's no oversight, no accountability, no kind of recognition for the 14th Amendment for equal protection under color of law. There's definitely some things that I want to address in this, and this is 1998 Best Practices of Law Enforcement in North Carolina as it relates to domestic violence. And this is from the Office of Violence Against Women. And as some of you know, North Carolina is trying to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act, and I believe this needs to be a federal mandate, and it needs to be rewritten to include post-separation abuse within the confines of custody. Because once she leaves, the only way to break her, hurt her, and make her pay for going to tell people the truth about what he did, and the fact that he lost his power when she took hers back, is to hurt her child, and he will play a doting father. But guess what? A doting father would never want to take a child away from its mother. High conflict is domestic violence. Parents don't just go fight in court over a child. Who wants it more? I want more time. I want more time. That's not how it goes. One person is the perpetrator. The other person survived by leaving. But she won't for very long if we don't recognize that that relationship exists. within the most dangerous time for a victim, post-separation, which you got to ask yourself, of all of the women and children that were murdered by an abuser, how many of those women do you think said, it's over, I'm leaving, our relationship is done, I can't do this, tried to leave? How many of those victims do you think that was the case? So if we're recording murders and we're not acknowledging the fact that she left, she ended the relationship, that's why he killed her. They are not boyfriend and girlfriend. They are not husband and wife. That would be separated. Are they not legally separated? She was trying to leave. Nobody seems to recognize that at this point, and that's a major issue. Another issue is just because he choked you and, beat you and slammed you to the ground and called you a dumb dog doesn't mean he's going to abuse his kids. He's a good dad. Newsflash, men who abuse women abuse children. That's the surrogate for mommy. Can't hurt her anymore. Guess what? We got a nice little surrogate to pass the suffering and aggression on to. And trust me, it's going to affect the mother. Either by him taking the children altogether to exert ultimate dominance, or by harming the children in numerous ways as she's forced to co-parent with an abusive man. Dragged, raked over the coals trying to prove something that we all know is true. But just like in the past with this repetitive cycle of violence, sexual abuse, can't talk about that. I guess that's one of those things you're supposed to keep behind the curtain. And I think it's time to open the curtain. And I think it's time to address perpetrators, hold them accountable, and protect victims. So, this best practices of North Carolina law enforcement response to domestic violence victims needs to be something that this needs to be something that is reauthorized, revamped, and enforced everywhere, not just in the state of North Carolina. So, in the past, law enforcement just returned to the same addresses to mediate, keep the peace, and then it became a family problem. Same couples, passed down to the next generation, right? That's fine. Obviously, there's civil liability for that special relationship of law enforcement. So, law enforcement owes a duty of care based on certain examples and laws. That's definitely something that could change in the future by holding them accountable, because there are numerous cases where people have sued the state of North Carolina and found that a breach of that duty, a causal connection between the conduct and the injury and the actual loss, it's negligence can be found in that. And that's law enforcement. That's people that are supposed to protect. They're not. And so also the law enforcement response being for, let's see here. One of them being addressing when a child is a witness or a child has been kidnapped. If a child is not returned from court-ordered parenting time from an abuser, there is an immediate response. We are concerned for this child with this type of person. If we are not even acknowledging that this type of person is dangerous, and we know there's so many women and children being murdered every day, on TV, on Facebook. It's just like out of control. Something else that, outside of this that I believe is relevant is how New York just passed Kyra's law. They're going to make a special mandated forensic interview widespread all over the state for any custody evaluation. So this is going to be a forensic custody evaluator, a mental health professional trained in every aspect of domestic violence to evaluate before any custody is given to an abusive man. Now think about how that funding could be spent to fix a broken system in family courts and stop the killings, stop the suffering. But it's taken this long to even talk about it. So obviously we need some movement. So basically what we're asking for is, you know, respect, protection, acknowledgement, validation. We know that a lot of officers are abusers themselves, and there's not a lot of accountability. That's something that is also an issue. And at that point, you would need, you know, if you're dealing with a law enforcement officer, someone like that, you're going to need about 2 supervisors along with them if there's any calls. So, just so you know. This is just an awesome guide that it would be a dream come true if this was implemented everywhere. I just have to say, this document is amazing, and I'm definitely going to bring it up in the summer for the reauthorization of violence against women on June 24th. So it also talks about federal laws being violated, crossing state lines to injure an intimate partner, or harass or intimidate, forcing an intimate partner to cross state lines, coercion, duress, fraud, bodily injury, interstate protective order violations, federal crimes, Violence Against Women Act. These are all separate crimes, but guess what? All of these violations have happened to me and my daughter, yet not one of these charges has been taken out. The kidnapping was covered up. I've had to go to internal affairs. They're trying to still act funny, and I have to assert my legal right for protection constantly. That shouldn't be how it is. Like, this is just insane. At this point, this is something that this document also says, which it's difficult for victims to report things to certain agencies if a lot is going on and they're confused. And there's so many different chaotic things happening. It sounds like she might be unstable, like she's rambling, she's crying. What is she talking about? We need trained people taking those calls. There needs to be a division for these kinds of crimes. This is crimes against humanity. It's an infringement on every right as a human that you have in this situation. And first, it's like millions of women going through it. So, obviously a problem that needs to be addressed. It does say that the FBI and or the U.S. Attorney's Office should be contacted in instances in which one of these federal crimes are committed as a victim as defined above. So, well, that might be something I do tomorrow before or after court. It's a good idea. First time I saw that. Then we're going to go down to victim safety and missing persons, missing juveniles. Children of domestic violence victims are at serious risk for paternal abduction, physical and emotional injury, and possibly death, as the offender attempts to further control and manipulate the victim. If a victim reports that children have been abducted or the abusive partner has failed to return them from visitation, officers should file a missing person report immediately. An investigation should be promptly initiated to locate and determine the well-being of the child. The case may require the report to be made to another entity, CPS. The batterer may also report the children missing in an attempt to locate the victim. Officers should be alert to this possibility and check for the history of domestic violence. I couldn't even imagine if this was the case. They actually address this. I mean, that'd be the most exciting thing ever. Peace, hate, safety, harmony. Also, it's definitely some more on-scene responses, professional conduct, assist another person's calls, documenting child abuse, protecting the victim, and just really, giving so much power back to somebody who took hers back when she left. So this document, like I said, is amazing, and I'm going to have to do some work to upload it so everybody can read it, because this needs to be law yesterday. Seriously. And to be honest, all of this cycle of violence that continues over and over, and this cycle of hidden abuse within family that causes so much shame to the victims, it causes so much guilt, and they never get to express what happened till maybe they're much older, and even then it doesn't feel like healing because nothing was done to give them back that safety that was stolen, that peace and that innocence, especially for child victims. So it needs to be safe for children to disclose the abuse. If we are telling a generation of children, you disclosed abuse, go get abused some more for telling. Imagine how many children around the world are with their abuser right now because they told. What are we telling these kids? Don't tell. Don't tell anybody. It doesn't matter. We don't believe you because women lie, right? The court assumes that if there are two people in a family court matter, that they're both fit parents. That is not correct. A good father doesn't drag the mother, or, vice versa, but we're talking about mothers specifically, does not drag her through family court to take time away with her child on purpose. He's going to know that that is going to cause so much harm to the children that he would never do it. Nor is he going to be making reports, charges, filings, smearing her name, credibility, trying to say she abused the children all of a sudden when that was never an issue ever in the past. Never had any issue of her stability until she left and spoke the truth in court. Now, all of a sudden, what does she do? And in my instance, the allegations were just disgusting and inappropriate. All because I reported what my daughter told me happened to her and that what I witnessed, and I was being honest. That caused so much more harm. And if our system is rigged for the abuser to win, we shouldn't be surprised when the next generation is worse than anyone before. We still have time. We still have time to save some of these children. There's some of these mothers and children out here haven't seen each other in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. These mothers that I've spoken to, some of them do sound unstable now. It's like the longer they're away from their children, the more unstable they sound. And it's so sad because I know they're not well. They've been drained of the most important thing of their life in their life. The most crucial thing that keeps them going as a woman. If you're a mother, take that away. And solitude has gotten me this far, but I'd prefer to have been a mother instead. So again, if we're telling victims, don't tell by our actions. We don't care. We're telling our children that it's okay for someone to abuse them. We're telling these children that it doesn't matter what happens to you, nobody's gonna believe you. You don't have much value. And the cycle will continue. And maybe that creates so much chaos in funding that it's going to be allowed to be continued in certain aspects in certain places. But I hope that by sharing this message and by joining forces with other people who want to make a difference, that we can implement these things. We can protect mothers and children. We can see the happiness again, because it's been drained from society as a whole. And in 2021, it shouldn't be like 1950. It feels like that. It really does. So, that being said, I've definitely been making some moves lately. I'm just trying to do whatever I can to bring attention to this cause, because it's obviously very near and dear to my heart. And I do just want to add one thing about teenagers in this situation. A lot of these mothers who have left an abuser, there was a child present that witnessed the abuse, and that child, whether they witnessed it, throughout the separation or what, these children, as they become older and the mother is smeared a little bit more and degraded through the court actions, these teenagers, these who were children who witnessed abuse, they align with the abuser. And then they start hurting the victim, the survivor as well, and the other little children, causing commotion and creating chaos, even joining in the assault and the attack with the perpetrator. And this is happening at an alarming rate to these women. The teenagers won't speak to them, lied about them on the stand. I mean, it's just like, and these children had good childhoods with the mother other than the abuse, but these children become abusers, or they become abused, or both. And that's what we have to face in the future. And like I said, a lot of these mothers, protective parents, there is no chance left. The children are gone. So much has happened to them. There's not much hope for the future, but I'd like to think that as society learns of the truth about what's actually happening behind closed doors, behind the curtain, that they can come back home. They can go see mom. And there can be a relationship again without the state capitalizing upon love and hate and obsession and violence. That is all I have for today, and I'll be working on audio of a hearing where I represented myself, and there's cross-examination with my teenage daughter, my ex, guardian ad litem, as well as a teacher from my child's school, as I was faced with my third false allegation. I won that hearing, by the way, so I'll be uploading that on YouTube, and just wishing everyone a peaceful night. So, peace.